They said her womb was a graveyard. In the dusty records of the Arizona Territory, 1874, there lies a forgotten incident report filed by a man named Silas Thorne. He claimed his wife was taken by savages, but the truth wasn't a kidnapping. It was a disposal. She was traded away like a lame horse because she couldn't give him an heir. Eliza Thorne was sent to an Apache camp expected to die a slave. Instead, she found a warrior who looked at her barrenness and spoke 4 words that toppled an empire of hate. This is the true, untold story of the woman who burned the West down to build a new life. The silence in the cabin was louder than the wind, howling across the jagged spine of the Dragoon Mountains. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that smelled of stale coffee, wood smoke, and Silas Thorne's simmering resentment. Eliza sat by the window, her fingers working a needle through tough canvas, though her eyes were fixed on the horizon where the sun was bleeding out over the scrubland. She was 24 years old, but in the harsh reflection of the window pane, she looked 40. The Arizona sun had leached the softness from her skin, leaving her weathered. But it was the coldness inside the cabin that had hollowed out her eyes. "Supper," Silas grunted. He didn't look up from the ledger he was scribbling in. He never looked at her anymore. Not really. He looked through her, searching for the ghost of the son he didn't have. Eliza stood, the floorboards groaning under her boots. She ladled the stew into a tin bowl and set it before him. "It's rabbit," she said softly. "Caught it near the creek." Silas ignored the food. He tapped the ledger with the end of his pen. "Dr. Abernathy was clear, Eliza. 3 years. No swelling of the belly. No morning sickness. Nothing." He finally looked up, his eyes pale and hard like tumbled river stones. "You're dry. A dried-up creek bed." Eliza flinched, a reflex she had learned to suppress but couldn't quite master. "God has his timing, Silas." "God has nothing to do with a broken tool," Silas spat, pushing the bowl away. It clattered against the rough-hewn table. "I need hands, Eliza. I need sons to hold this land when the government surveys come through next spring. A man with no heir is just a placeholder for the next man who has one." This was the conversation they had every night. It was the prayer Silas offered to the darkness, a prayer of complaint. He was a man of the New West, ambitious, ruthless, and entirely devoid of sentiment. He had married Eliza specifically for her hips, which were wide, and her family's reputation for large broods. When she failed to conceive in the first year, he was annoyed. By the second, he was angry. Now, in the 3rd year, he was desperate. "I spoke to Jedediah at the trading post," Silas said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low register. "He says the Apaches are moving south, raiding parties near the pass." "We should board up the windows then," Eliza said, her voice trembling slightly. "Or," Silas stood up, his shadow stretching long across the floor, swallowing her whole. "We pack. We move the herd to Tucson. Sell the horses before they get stolen." Tucson? Eliza felt a flicker of hope. Tucson meant civilization. It meant a church. It meant other women who might not look at her with pity. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow at dawn," Silas said. He walked to the door, looking out at the darkening land. "Pack light, Eliza. Only what's worth keeping." She didn't miss the way his eyes slid over her when he said worth keeping. That night, Eliza lay awake, staring at the rough timber of the ceiling. She thought of Dr. Abernathy, a man whose medical license was as dubious as his sobriety. He had poked and prodded her last month, smelling of gin, and declared her inhospitable to life. He hadn't offered a remedy, just a shrug and a bill for $2. She placed a hand over her flat stomach. She didn't feel barren. She felt full of love she had nowhere to pour, full of words she wasn't allowed to speak, and full of a simmering heat that felt dangerously like rage. She didn't know it then, but that heat was the only thing that would keep her alive in the week to come. The next morning was a blur of dust and movement. Silas was frantic, hitching the team, shouting orders. He seemed possessed by a nervous energy that didn't match the task at hand. They weren't just moving. He was running. They took the southern route, a dangerous path that skirted the edge of Chiricahua territory. It was shorter, but foolish. When Eliza questioned it, Silas struck her, a backhand across the face that tasted of copper and shock. "Don't question me, woman," he roared, the veins in his neck bulging. "I know the trails." But he didn't know the trails. Or perhaps he knew them too well. By noon on the second day, the heat was a physical weight. The horses were foaming, and then the silence of the desert was broken not by a gunshot, but by the thundering of hooves. They came over the ridge like a landslide, 6 of them, Apaches. They weren't wearing the war paint Eliza had seen in the penny dreadfuls. They were dusty, hard men on lean ponies, holding Winchester rifles with practiced ease. Silas pulled the wagon to a halt. He didn't reach for his gun. He didn't scream. He sat frozen, his hands white on the reins. Eliza grabbed his arm. "Silas, the rifle, under the seat." "Quiet," he hissed. The leader of the riders approached. He was a striking man, his hair streaked with gray, his face a map of deep lines. This wasn't the man she would come to know later. This was just a raider. He gestured with his rifle barrel toward the horses in the back. "Silas," Eliza whispered, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. "Please." Silas looked at the Apache leader. Then he looked at Eliza. For a moment, she saw something in his eyes that she would never forget. It wasn't fear. It was calculation. He was doing arithmetic. Horses, money. Eliza, burden. "I have no quarrel," Silas shouted, his voice cracking. He held up his hands. "I am a man of trade." The Apache looked at him with disdain. He said something in his own tongue, and the other riders laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "Take the horses!" Silas yelled, gesturing to the 3 mares tied to the rear of the wagon. "Take them!" The leader shook his head. He pointed the rifle at Silas's chest, then shifted the aim slightly. To Eliza. Silas flinched. He looked at his wife. "She," Silas stammered. She is strong. She can work." Eliza's breath stopped. The world tilted on its axis. "Silas?" "She has no children," Silas shouted to the Apache, mimicking a rocking motion and shaking his head. "No babies? Barren? But strong back. Good worker." The Apache leader frowned, looking between the terrified woman and the sweating, desperate man. "You take her," Silas bargained, his voice dropping to a shameful plea. "You take her, and you leave me the team. You leave me my wagon. A trade." Eliza screamed. It was a raw, animal sound that tore from her throat. "No, Silas, goddammit, no!" She lunged for the reins, but Silas shoved her. He pushed her hard, right off the bench seat. She tumbled into the red dirt, the impact knocking the wind out of her. She gasped, clawing at the dust, trying to stand. The Apache riders watched this display with unreadable expressions. A man selling his wife to save his own skin. It was a cowardice so profound, even the wind seemed to stop to witness it. The leader trotted his horse over to where Eliza lay. He looked down at her. Then he looked at Silas. He nodded once. 2 riders dismounted. They didn't grab the horses. They grabbed Eliza. "Silas!" she shrieked, as rough hands hauled her up. They bound her wrists with rawhide so tight it burned. "Silas, look at me. I am your wife." Silas didn't look. He slapped the reins, and the wagon lurched forward. He didn't look back. Not once. He drove away, disappearing into the dust, leaving her surrounded by men whose language she did not speak, sold for the price of safe passage and a team of mules. The journey was a blur of agony. They tied her to a lead rope behind a pony, forcing her to run until her lungs burned and her boots fell apart. When she fell, they dragged her until she scrambled back up. They didn't speak to her. They didn't abuse her, surprisingly. They treated her like livestock being moved from one pasture to another. Eliza's mind fractured during those 3 days. The grief of the betrayal was too large to process, so she locked it away in a black iron box in her mind. She focused on the pain in her feet, the thirst, the rhythm of the hooves. They climbed higher, into the cooler air of the mountains. Through passes so narrow, the sky became a sliver of blue ribbon. Finally, they crested a ridge and looked down into a hidden valley. Teepees and wickiups were scattered along a riverbank. Smoke curled lazily into the air. Dogs barked. Children ran. It looked normal. Terrifyingly normal. As they rode in, the camp stopped. Women looked up from grinding corn. Warriors sharpening arrows paused. Everyone stared at the white woman with the torn dress and the hair like tangled straw. They brought her to the center of the camp and cut the rope. Eliza collapsed, her knees hitting the earth. She waited for the knife. She waited for the fire. She had heard the stories. She knew what happened to captives. A shadow fell over her. She looked up. Standing before her was a man who seemed to be carved from the mountain itself. He was taller than the others, broad-shouldered, wearing a simple buckskin shirt and leggings. His hair was long, black as a raven's wing, held back by a simple red cloth. But it was his face that arrested her. It was harsh, angular, but his eyes were not filled with the chaotic malice of the raiders. They were dark, deep, and terrifyingly intelligent. This was Chayton. The raider who had brought her spoke rapidly, gesturing to Eliza, then making the sign for "no baby" that Silas had made. He laughed. Chayton did not laugh. He looked at Eliza, studying her face, her hands, the way she held her chin up despite the dirt and the tears. "Stand," he said. Eliza blinked. He spoke English. It was accented, thick and slow, but it was English. She tried to stand, but her legs failed her. She fell back. Chayton extended a hand. It was scarred, calloused, but he didn't grab her. He waited. He was offering, not taking. Eliza stared at the hand. Silas had never offered a hand. Silas only gave orders. Trembling, she reached out. His grip was iron firm, pulling her to her feet with effortless strength. "My name is Eliza," she whispered, her voice a croak. "You are Izze," he mispronounced it slightly, giving it a softer edge. "Your trade?" "My husband." She choked on the word. "He left me. He said I was barren." Chayton tilted his head. "Barren? Like the desert?" "Yes, like the desert." Chayton looked around at the other men, then back to her. "The desert gives life to those who know how to ask for it. Your man was a fool." He turned to an older woman standing nearby, a matriarch with silver braids and a face like a dried apple. He spoke to her in Apache. The woman nodded, her eyes narrowing at Eliza, assessing her. "Go with Nolly," Chayton said to Eliza. "She will clean you. You work, you eat, you do not run. If you run, the desert takes you. If you stay, you live." "Why?" Eliza asked, a spark of defiance breaking through her exhaustion. Why keep me? I can't give you children either. I'm useless. Chayton stepped closer. He smelled of sage and horse sweat and rain. He looked down at her, his dark eyes boring into her soul. White men build fences around everything, he said quietly. Even women. Here, there are no fences. We will see what you are. He turned and walked away. Eliza was led to the river by Nolly. The water was freezing, shocking the dust from her skin. Nolly handed her a rough tunic of deerskin and took away her tattered dress. As Eliza washed, scrubbing the memory of Silas's hands from her body, she watched Chayton across the camp. He was sitting by a fire, whittling a piece of ash wood. He hadn't touched her. He hadn't mocked her. He traded for me, she thought. But what does he want? Weeks turned into months. The calendar in Eliza's head dissolved, replaced by the cycles of the moon and the changing colors of the aspen leaves. She was not a guest, but she was not treated as a slave in the way she expected. She worked harder than she ever had on Silas's farm. Nolly was a demanding taskmaster. Eliza learned to tan hides, the brain paste stinking and slick on her hands. She learned to find roots that were edible and avoid the ones that killed. She learned to carry water until her shoulders felt like they were separating from the sockets. She expected cruelty. She found indifference, which slowly turned into cautious acceptance. The camp was a world of strict rules and deep bonds. She watched the mothers with their children and felt the old ache in her chest, the hollow space Silas had despised. But here, no one pointed at her. No one whispered Barren when she walked by. Her interactions with Chayton were few, but significant. He was a leader of this band, a war chief who spent days away on patrol, returning with weary eyes and dust-caked skin. One evening, Eliza was struggling with a heavy load of firewood. She slipped on a patch of loose shale, sending the wood clattering. She fell hard, scraping her arm. She sat there for a moment, the frustration boiling over. She picked up a log and hurled it into the darkness, screaming a curse word she'd heard the mule skinsters use. Good throw. She spun around. Chayton was leaning against a tree, watching her. I hate this, she hissed, wiping blood from her arm. I hate the dirt. I hate the cold. Good, Chayton said, walking over. He crouched down. Hate is fire. Fire keeps you warm. I don't want to be warm. I want to go home. No. She stopped. I don't have a home. You have a spot by the fire. You have food. He picked up a piece of the wood she had dropped. My wife. She died 3 winters ago. Smallpox. The white sickness. Eliza looked at him, surprised by the admission. I'm sorry. Did you have children? Chayton looked at the firelight dancing in the distance. 2. The sickness took them too. The silence stretched between them, heavy with grief. Silas wanted sons, Eliza said, the words tumbling out. He wanted them for his name, for his land. When I couldn't give them, I ceased to be a person to him. Chayton looked at her, his expression unreadable. And you? You wanted them? I wanted to be a mother, she said softly. I have so much love, Chayton, and nowhere to put it. Chayton stood up. He reached down and picked up the bundle of wood as if it weighed nothing. Come. Nolly has stew. Wait, Eliza said, standing up. Why did you take me? That day at the wagon, you could have killed us both. You could have taken the horses. Chayton turned back. The moonlight caught the sharp angle of his cheekbone. I saw his eyes, Chayton said. He looked at you like a broken rifle. A man who does not know the value of his weapon will eventually shoot himself. He paused. And I saw your eyes. You were not broken. You were just unloaded. He walked away, leaving Eliza standing in the dark, her heart hammering a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. The dynamic changed after that night. Chayton began to teach her. He showed her how to track a deer by the disturbance of the pine needles. He taught her how to use a knife, not for cooking, but for fighting. Apache women are not weak, he told her as they sparred with wooden sticks. If the soldiers come, you must fight. I'm not Apache, she grunted, parrying his strike. You are not white anymore either, he countered, sweeping her legs. She hit the ground with a thud. She looked up, breathless, expecting him to be gloating. He was smiling, a genuine small smile. Get up, Izze, he said. She got up, and she tackled him. It was clumsy, and he could have easily thrown her off, but he let her drive him back a step. They grappled, dust swirling, until he pinned her arms to her sides, both of them breathing hard. They were close, dangerously close. You fight like a wildcat, he murmured. I'm learning, she whispered. He released her and stepped back, his face suddenly serious again. But the air between them had shifted. It was charged with electricity. The camp began to whisper. They saw the way Chayton watched the white woman. They saw the way she looked at him, not with fear, but with a fierce, growing respect. But the outside world was closing in. 6 months after her arrival, a scout rode into camp, his horse foaming. He spoke rapidly to Chayton. Chayton's face darkened. He turned to the camp, his voice ringing out. Bluecoats, 1 day's ride, a large column. Eliza felt a cold knot in her stomach. The army. If they found her, she would be rescued. She would be sent back to civilization, back to the whispers, back to the shame. Or worse, returned to Silas. Chayton walked over to her. He checked the knife at her belt. They come for the land, he said. But if they see you, they will kill us all to save you. I won't go with them, Eliza said, surprising herself. You may not have a choice, Chayton said grimly. We move, tonight, into the Dragoon stronghold. As the camp scrambled to pack, Eliza worked alongside Nolly, rolling blankets and dousing fires. She was no longer Eliza, the Barren wife. She was Izze, the woman who fought with sticks and carried wood. But as they moved out under the cover of darkness, Eliza didn't know that the column of soldiers wasn't just on a random patrol. They were being guided by a man who had realized that a dead wife couldn't sign over the deed to the land he wanted to sell. Silas Thorne was coming back, not for love, but for a signature. The Dragoon Mountains were a fortress of granite, a chaotic jumble of boulders and spires that looked as if they had been thrown by angry gods. For the Apache, this was sanctuary. For the U.S. cavalry, it was a death trap. Eliza, now fully answering to Izze, moved with the women and children. The hem of her deerskin dress was heavy with mud, and her muscles ached from the relentless pace set by Chayton. They had been moving for 2 days, zigzagging through canyons to shake the pursuit. But the Bluecoats were persistent, too persistent. They track like wolves, Nolly whispered, pausing to adjust the cradleboard on her back where her grandson slept. Soldiers are usually stupid. They make noise. They break branches. These ones, they follow the spirit trail. Eliza wiped sweat from her forehead. It's not the soldiers, she said, a dark realization settling in her gut. It's him. Nolly looked at her. The husband? Silas, Eliza nodded. He was a surveyor before he was a rancher. He knows maps. He knows the lay of the land better than he knows his own Bible. That afternoon, the echo of a bugle shattered the stillness of the canyon. It bounced off the canyon walls, making it impossible to tell where the sound originated. "Take cover!" Chayton's voice roared from the vanguard. The women and children scrambled into the crevices of the rock face, blending into the shadows. Eliza found a niche behind a twisted juniper tree, clutching her knife. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Below, on the valley floor, the dust cloud heralded their arrival. First came the scouts, Apache scouts, traders working for the army. Then the soldiers, their brass buttons dull with dust. And there, riding beside the lieutenant on a fresh bay horse, was Silas Thorne. Seeing him, after 6 months, was like a physical blow. He looked different. He wore a new frock coat, ridiculous for the heat, and a stiff-brimmed hat. He looked prosperous. He looked smug. The lieutenant raised his hand, halting the column. "We lose the tracks here, Mr. Thorne. The rock swallows them." Silas rode forward, scanning the cliffs. Eliza shrank back, pressing herself into the stone. "They're here." Silas's voice drifted up, carried by the wind. "I can smell them. He wouldn't leave the women behind. That buck, Chayton, he has a weakness for strays." Eliza's blood ran cold. He knows Chayton's name. "We cannot engage them in the rocks, Mr. Thorne," the lieutenant argued. "My orders are to contain, not to massacre." "Your orders, Lieutenant, are to retrieve stolen property," Silas snapped, "and to secure the safety of the territory. My wife is up there, a white woman held captive by savages. Do you want that on your conscience? Or do you want your name in the papers as a hero?" Eliza peered through the branches. Silas wasn't looking for a wife. He was looking for an asset. She saw him pull a document from his saddlebag, a folded paper with a government seal. The deed, she realized, the land grant. In the Arizona Territory, the Homestead Act and the new mining claims had specific clauses. A married man could claim double the acreage, but to sell it or transfer the mineral rights, both spouses had to sign. Silas had likely found copper or silver on their worthless scrubland. He couldn't cash in if his wife was missing. He needed her alive, just long enough to put ink to paper. "Fire a volley," Silas ordered. "Scare them out." "I will not fire blindly into civilians," the lieutenant protested. "Then I will." Silas drew his revolver and fired a shot into the rocks. The bullet sparked off a boulder just 10 feet below Eliza. The crack was deafening. Instantly, the canyon erupted. The Apache warriors, hidden in the heights, returned fire. Arrows and rifle shots rained down on the column. The soldiers' horses panicked, rearing and screaming. "Move!" Nolly grabbed Eliza's arm. "We go higher, to the caves." Eliza scrambled up the rock face, her hands finding purchase on the rough granite. Below her, the skirmish was chaos. She looked back and saw Chayton leaping from a ledge, landing on a soldier's horse and pulling the man down. He fought with a terrifying grace, a whirlwind of motion. But then she saw Silas. He wasn't fighting. He had dismounted and was taking aim with a long-barreled rifle. He wasn't aiming at Chayton. He was aiming at the path the women were taking. He was aiming at her. A bullet chipped the rock next to her ear, sending stone fragments into her cheek. She gasped, stumbling. "I see you, Eliza!" Silas's voice bellowed over the gunfire. "Come down, now, or I'll shoot the old hag next to you." Eliza froze. Nolly was climbing just ahead of her. Silas had the leverage. Eliza made a choice. She didn't climb. She turned around. She stood up on the ledge, silhouetted against the sky. "I'm here, Silas," she screamed. "Stop shooting." The gunfire from the valley floor faltered. All eyes turned to the woman on the cliff, her hair wild, wearing Apache skins. "Eliza!" Silas shouted, lowering the rifle slightly. "Get down here. These animals have turned you." "The only animal here is you," she screamed back. "You sold me. You traded me for a team of mules." The soldiers exchanged glances. The lieutenant looked at Silas, his brow furrowing. "Traded, Mr. Thorne. You said she was abducted." Silas's face turned crimson. "She's mad. The heat, the trauma. She's hysterical. Cover me." Silas began to climb the scree slope toward her. "Go, Izze." Chayton's voice came from below. He was fighting his way up the slope, cutting through two soldiers to get to her. "I won't let him hurt Nolly," Eliza cried. "Run!" Chayton roared. Silas was gaining ground. He was panting, his face twisted in greed and rage. "You ungrateful bitch! I have a buyer in Tombstone waiting. Get down here." Eliza looked at the man she had once vowed to obey. Then she looked at the rock in her hand. It wasn't a weapon, but it was all she had. She hurled it. It struck Silas in the shoulder, knocking him off balance. He slipped on the loose gravel, sliding back 10 yards. "I am not your wife," Eliza yelled. "I am Izzi of the Chiricahua." She turned and sprinted up the cliff, following Nolly into the shadow of the caves. Behind her, the battle raged on, but the dynamic had shifted. The soldiers were confused, their moral certainty shaken. And Chayton was coming. The retreat into the high caves saved them, but at a cost. They were cut off from the water source, trapped in a box canyon with only one narrow exit, which the soldiers now guarded. Night fell, bringing a bitter chill. The Apache band huddled in the back of a large limestone cavern. The mood was grim. They had 3 wounded warriors. Chayton sat by a small, smokeless fire, binding a gash on his thigh. Eliza knelt beside him, taking the strips of cloth from his hands. "Let me," she said softly. He hissed as she tightened the bandage. "Your husband, he fights with the desperation of a starving coyote." "He found silver," Eliza said, her hands working efficiently. "Or copper. That's why he's here. He needs my signature to sell the claim." Chayton looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting the dying embers. "He risks his life for rocks?" "For power," Eliza corrected. "In his world, rocks are power." "And in my world?" Chayton gestured to the dark cave, the hungry children, the wounded men. "What is power here?" "Endurance," Eliza answered without hesitation. Chayton smiled, a rare, fleeting thing. "You learn fast, Izze." He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. He brushed a stray lock of hair from her cheek, his thumb grazing the cut where the rock fragment had hit her. "He tried to kill you." "He tried to clip my wings," she said. "He thinks if he wounds me, I'll fall into his basket." "He does not know you have grown talons," Chayton murmured. The moment hung suspended in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. For 6 months, they had danced around this. The respect that was turning into affection. The shared survival that was knitting their souls together. "Chayton," she whispered, "if they come in the morning?" "They will come," he said simply. "I won't go back. I'll jump from the ledge before I let him put shackles on me again." Chayton grabbed her wrist. His grip was intense. "No, you do not throw your life away. Life is the only thing we truly own. If they take you, I will come for you. As long as breath is in my body, I will come. I don't want you to die for me. I would not die for you. Chayton said, his voice dropping to a rumble. I would live for you. That is harder. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her, spoken in a cave that smelled of dust and dried blood. Dawn approaches, Nolly said from the shadows. The bluecoats are moving. Chayton stood, testing his leg. We break out. The soldiers expect us to defend the cave. They expect us to be rats in a hole. Instead, we will be the flood. The plan was madness. They would stampede the remaining horses through the soldiers' line, using the confusion to scatter into the labyrinth of the stronghold. As the sun crested the peaks, painting the rocks in violently bright oranges and reds, the Apache struck. Chayton led the charge, riding bareback on a paint pony, screaming a war cry that echoed like thunder. Eliza rode behind him, clinging to the waist of Nolly, who rode like a demon. They burst from the canyon mouth. The soldiers, expecting a surrender or a sniper battle, were caught off guard by the sheer velocity of the charge. Gunfire erupted, horses collided, dust blinded everyone. Eliza saw Silas. He was mounted again, near the rear. He saw them breaking the line. Stop them, Silas screamed. Shoot the horses. A soldier raised his carbine and fired. Nolly's horse jerked violently, hit in the neck. The horse went down, throwing Eliza and Nolly into the dust. Eliza hit the ground hard, rolling. She scrambled up, coughing. Nolly! The old woman was motionless. Get her! Silas roared, spurring his horse toward Eliza. Eliza reached for the knife at her belt, but a soldier was on top of her instantly, pinning her arms. She kicked and screamed, biting his hand, but he was too heavy. Got her! The soldier yelled. Chayton, who had broken through the line, turned his horse. He saw Eliza pinned. He saw Silas riding toward her with a rope. Chayton didn't hesitate. He wheeled his pony around and charged back into the kill box. Chayton, no! Eliza screamed. He rode straight for the soldier holding her, swinging his war club. The soldier took the blow to the helmet and collapsed. Eliza was free. Up! Chayton extended his arm. Eliza grabbed it. He swung her up behind him. But Silas was there. He was 10 feet away, his pistol raised. She is mine, Silas shouted, his eyes wide with insanity. He fired. The bullet didn't hit Eliza. It hit Chayton. Eliza felt the impact shudder through his body. He grunted, a wet, sharp sound, but he didn't fall. He kicked the horse, and they surged forward, weaving through the chaos. You're hit! Eliza cried, feeling the warm slickness of blood on his back. Hold on! Chayton gritted out. They galloped through the gap in the soldiers' line, plunging into the narrow ravine that led deep into the uncharted wilderness of the Chiricahuas. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit faded, but the damage was done. They rode for an hour, the horse laboring. Chayton's posture began to slump. We have to stop, Eliza begged. Chayton, you're bleeding too much. Not yet, he wheezed. Further, where horses cannot follow. They reached a hidden cleft in the rock, a place known only to the Apache, where water trickled from a spring. Chayton slid from the horse and collapsed. Eliza was at his side instantly. The bullet had taken him in the side, just below the ribs. It was bad. Silas, Chayton whispered, his eyes losing focus. He missed his target. He hit you, Eliza sobbed, ripping strips from her dress to pack the wound. He aimed for your heart. Chayton managed a weak smile. He hit mine. Eliza froze, her hands covered in his blood. Don't you talk like that. You are the warrior. You don't die. Build a fire, Chayton whispered, his eyes closing. Burn the sage. We fight. The spirit battle now. For 3 days and 3 nights, death sat in the corner of the small cave, waiting to take Chayton. Eliza did not sleep. She became a creature of pure instinct. She cleaned the wound with water she boiled. She packed it with yarrow and spider webs, tricks Nolly had taught her. She forced water between his cracked lips, drop by drop. She spoke to him constantly, anchoring him to the world of the living with her voice. She told him about her childhood in Ohio. She told him about the first time she saw the ocean. She told him about the books she used to read. On the 4th morning, the fever broke. Eliza was dozing against the rock wall when she heard a rustle. She snapped awake. Chayton was watching her. His face was gaunt, his skin pale beneath the bronze tan, but his eyes were clear. "You are still here," he rasped. "Where else would I be?" Eliza asked, crawling over to him with a cup of water. He drank greedily. Then he lay back, letting out a long breath. "I dreamed of the owl. He called my name, but a woman's voice kept shouting over him." Eliza smiled, tears running down her dusty face. "I can be very loud when I want to be." He looked at her, his gaze intense. "Why did you stay, Izze? You could have taken the horse, gone to Tucson. You would be free of Silas, free of the Apache life." "This isn't an Apache life or a white life anymore, Chayton," she said. "It's our life." He reached out and took her hand. His grip was weak, but the warmth was there. "Silas," Chayton said, his voice hardening. "He called you Barren. He threw you away like a broken pot." Eliza looked down. The old shame flickered, but it was dimmer now. He was right. I couldn't give him a son. In his world, that makes a woman worthless. Chayton squeezed her hand. "Do you know why the willow is strong? Not because it has many seeds, but because it bends in the storm and does not break. The oak is rigid. It snaps." He struggled to sit up, wincing. Eliza moved to help him, propping him against the wall. "Eliza." He used her white name, giving it a weight and dignity Silas never had. "Look at me." She met his eyes. "I had sons," Chayton said. "2 of them. Strong boys. They were to be warriors. I taught them to ride. I taught them to hunt. I thought my legacy was secure." He looked away, towards the mouth of the cave where the sunlight was cutting through the dust. Then the sickness came. In 3 days they were gone. My wife followed them a week later. He turned back to Eliza. "I spent a year mourning them. I thought the Creator was punishing me. I thought, what is a man without sons to carry his name?" "I know that feeling," Eliza whispered. "No," Chayton said firmly. "You do not, because you listened to a fool. Silas wanted sons to own the earth. He wanted copies of himself to put his brand on the world." Chayton leaned forward, ignoring the pain in his side. He took Eliza's face in his hands. "When I saw you fight the soldiers, when I saw you tend to me these past days, I realized something. I looked at you, fierce and loyal and strong, and I realized that blood is not the only way to build a tribe." He paused, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "I never wanted sons," Chayton said, his voice rough with emotion. "I wanted a spirit that could match my own. I wanted a partner who could ride into the fire and not burn. I wanted you." Eliza felt the world stop. The words healed a wound she hadn't realized was still bleeding. "But the tribe," she stammered, "your legacy." "Legacy is not who you leave behind," Chayton said. "It is what you teach the ones who survive. You are my legacy now, Izze, and I am yours." He pulled her closer. For the first time, he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and searing, a claim made in blood and survival. When they broke apart, Eliza rested her forehead against his chest. She listened to his heart, strong, steady, alive. "Silas is still out there," she said quietly. "He won't stop." "No," Chayton agreed. "He will not. He is a man possessed by a demon of greed." "He has the law on his side," Eliza said. "He has the army." "We have the mountain," Chayton said. "And we have the truth." "What truth?" Chayton reached into his pouch, the one he wore around his neck. He pulled out a crumpled, blood-stained piece of paper. Eliza's eyes widened. "What is that?" "I took it from the soldier I pulled down, the one carrying the mail bag." He unfolded it. It was a newspaper from Tucson, dated 2 weeks prior. He pointed to a small article on the bottom of the page. Eliza couldn't read the text in the dim light, but she recognized the name in the headline. Thorne. "Read it," Chayton said. Eliza squinted. Her breath hitched. Local rancher sued for fraud. Silas Thorne accused of selling invalid mining claims. First wife's family contest legality of new marriage. "New marriage?" Eliza gasped. "Keep reading," Chayton said. "Mr. Thorne, whose first wife, Eliza Thorne, was reported dead by Apache raid last year, has since remarried Miss Sarah Jenkins. However, the Jenkins family is seeking an annulment, citing that Mr. Thorne is medically unfit to produce heirs, a fact concealed during the dowry negotiations. Medical records from Ohio indicate a childhood bout of mumps left Mr. Thorne sterile." Eliza stared at the paper. The words swam before her eyes. Sterile. It wasn't her. It had never been her. "He knew," Eliza whispered, her voice shaking with a rage so pure it felt like white heat. "He knew he couldn't have children. He blamed me. He tortured me for 3 years, knowing it was him." "He needed a scapegoat," Chayton said. "A man like that cannot accept his own weakness, so he put it on you." Eliza stood up. The cave felt too small. She walked to the entrance and looked out over the vast, rugged landscape. She felt light. The heavy burden of barrenness that she had carried on her back was gone. It crumbled into dust and blew away on the wind. She wasn't broken. She wasn't a dead end. "He lied to me," she said, her voice turning cold and hard as the granite around them. "He stole my life. He sold me to die." She turned back to Chayton. "He's not hunting me for the land grant signature, Chayton." "No?" "No," Eliza said, her eyes flashing. "If I'm alive, he's a bigamist. If I'm alive, and the town finds out he lied about my death and his sterility, he loses everything. He loses the new wife, the dowry, the land, and his freedom. He hangs." She walked back to Chayton and knelt beside him. She picked up her knife and sharpened it against a stone. Shwick. Shwick. "He isn't here to rescue me," Eliza said. "He's here to finish the job." Chayton watched her. He saw the transformation complete. The rancher's wife was dead. The warrior woman was fully born. "Then we must make sure," Chayton said, "that the hunter becomes the prey." The sun was at its zenith, bleaching the color from the red rocks of the dragoon stronghold until the world looked like an overexposed photograph. The heat was a physical weight, pressing down on the canyon floor where Eliza stood alone. She wore her Apache buckskins, but she had forgone the beads and feathers. Today, she wore only the knife at her belt and the cold, hard resolve in her eyes. 50 yards up the scree slope, hidden in the deep shadow of a twisted juniper, lay Chayton. He was pale, his breath coming in shallow hitches, but his Winchester rifle was propped on a rock, the barrel steady as a compass needle. He had 1 shot, maybe 2, before the pain blacked him out. "He is coming," Chayton's voice drifted down, barely a whisper carried by the wind. Eliza nodded. She could hear the horse, a heavy, shod, hoof-striking stone. Not the unshod ponies of the Apache, but a heavy thoroughbred. Silas. He rode into the box canyon with the arrogance of a man who believes he owns the map. He was alone. The soldiers had likely been sent on a wild goose chase to the south, diverted by the false trails Nolly and the others had laid. Silas wanted this kill for himself. He needed to be the one to bury the secret. When he saw Eliza standing in the center of the clearing, he pulled his horse up short. The animal danced nervously, smelling the blood that had been spilled here days before. "Eliza!" Silas called out. His voice was jovial, a grotesque parody of a husband greeting his wife. "I told the lieutenant I'd find you. I told him a husband knows his wife's heart." "You don't know my heart, Silas," Eliza said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it echoed off the canyon walls. "And you don't know my name. Not anymore." Silas dismounted. He tied the reins to a scrub bush and slapped the dust from his frock coat. He walked toward her, his hand hovering near the Colt Navy revolver at his hip. "You look wild," Silas sneered, his eyes raking over her deerskin tunic. "Filthy. But we can fix that. A bath, a dress, or perhaps a pine box. It's all the same to the law." "The law?" Eliza took a step forward. "The law hangs bigamists, Silas." Silas froze. The smile dropped from his face like a mask slipping. "I don't know what you mean." "I know about Sarah Jenkins," Eliza said, watching him closely. "I know about the annulment. And I know about the mumps." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the cicadas seemed to stop buzzing. Silas's face went from sunburned red to a sickly shade of gray. "Who told you that?" he hissed, his hand gripping the pistol butt. "That savage? He lies." "The Tucson paper doesn't lie," Eliza countered. "You're sterile, Silas. You were the broken tool, not me. For 3 years you looked at me with hate. You made me feel like I was a graveyard, but it was you. You are the dead end." Silas drew his gun. The pretense was over. His face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "Shut your mouth," he screamed, the sound tearing his throat. "I am a man. I built this ranch. I tamed this land." "You built nothing," Eliza shouted back, not flinching as the barrel leveled at her chest. "You stole. You lied. And because you couldn't create life, you decided to destroy mine. If you breathe a word of this," Silas's hand shook. "If you ruin my name." "Your name is already dead, Silas. It dies with you. That's your fate. No sons, no legacy, just a lonely grave in the dirt." "Then you go first," Silas roared. He cocked the hammer. Crack. The sound of the Winchester from the ridge was sharp and dry. Silas's hat flew off his head, spun through the air, and landed in the dust. He staggered back, looking confused. He wasn't hit. Chayton had missed, or he had fired a warning. Silas looked up, scanning the rocks. "You missed, you red devil." He raised his pistol toward the ridge, aiming blindly at the shadows. "No!" Eliza screamed. She didn't run away. She ran at him. Silas spun around, startled by her aggression. He tried to bring the gun back to bear on her, but Eliza was already there. She didn't use the knife. She used the rage of 3 stolen years. She slammed into him, driving her shoulder into his chest. Silas, expecting a cowering victim, lost his footing on the loose shale. They went down together in a tangle of limbs and dust. Silas was stronger, but he was fighting for a lie. Eliza was fighting for her life. He struck her, a heavy blow to the cheek that made her vision swim. But she didn't let go of his gun arm. She clawed at his face, her nails leaving deep furrows. Get off me! Silas shrieked, panic setting in. He managed to shove her off. He scrambled to his knees, raising the gun again. Eliza was on the ground, breathless, staring down the black bore of the barrel. Goodbye, Eliza, Silas panted, blood dripping from his face. Thwack. It wasn't a gunshot. It was the wet, heavy sound of an arrow striking meat. Silas gasped. He looked down. An arrow was protruding from his chest, right through the lapel of his expensive coat. He looked up at the ridge. Chayton hadn't fired the rifle again. He had used the bow. Silent, precise. He was slumped over the rock, his strength gone, but his aim true. Silas dropped the gun. He fell to his knees. He looked at Eliza, his eyes wide with shock. He tried to speak, perhaps to curse her, perhaps to beg, but only a bubble of blood escaped his lips. He tipped forward, face first into the red Arizona dust. Eliza lay there for a long moment, watching the dust settle. The man who had been her tormentor, her god, and her judge, was now just a mound of dark clothes in the dirt. She stood up slowly. She walked over to him. She didn't feel triumph. She felt light. The heavy stone she had carried in her womb, the stone of his judgment, was gone. She looked up at the ridge. Chayton! There was no movement. Eliza scrambled up the slope, her heart in her throat. When she reached the juniper tree, Chayton was unconscious, the bough lying across his lap. His wound had opened again, soaking his buckskins. No, 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 Eliza wept, pressing her hands to his side. You don't get to leave. You promised. You said you'd live for me. She worked frantically, repacking the wound, pouring the last of their water into his mouth. She built a travois from the juniper branches and hauled him, inch by agonizing inch, down to the spring. For 2 weeks, they stayed in the canyon. It was a crucible. Eliza hunted lizards and gathered berries. She fought off a coyote with a rock. She became the provider, the protector, and slowly, miraculously, the warrior returned. It was a month later when they rode out. They didn't go back to the settlements. They didn't go to Tucson to clear her name. Eliza Thorne was dead. Let the world believe it. They rode south, deep into the Sierra Madre, where the borders of maps dissolved into the freedom of the mountains. Years later, travelers in the region would tell stories of a white woman and an Apache chief who ran a horse ranch in a hidden valley. They said the woman had eyes like flint and a laugh like rain. They said the couple had no children of their own, but the ranch was always full. It was full of orphans, Apache children whose parents had been killed by soldiers, and white children whose parents had been lost to the fever. Eliza and Chayton raised them all. They taught them to ride. They taught them to hunt. And they taught them that family wasn't about blood or names or legacies written in ledgers. One evening, watching a dozen children play in the river as the sun set over their land, Chayton put his arm around Eliza's waist. Look, he said softly, gesturing to the chaos of laughter and splashing water. The willow survived the storm. Eliza leaned into him, her hand resting on his scarred chest, and the warrior found his peace. We have many sons, Chayton noted, watching a young boy wrestle a dog, and many daughters. We have a tribe, Eliza corrected. She looked at the horizon, where the purple mountains met the sky. She thought of Silas, buried in a nameless grave in a box canyon, forgotten by the world he tried so hard to own. He had died for a name. She had lived for love. And as the stars began to wheel overhead, Eliza knew that was the only legacy that mattered. And that is the story of Eliza Thorne, the woman they called Barren, who ended up mothering a legend. It's a brutal reminder that sometimes the people who judge us the harshest are just projecting their own failures onto us. Silas was so obsessed with his legacy and his bloodline that he missed the entire point of being alive. He wanted a son to be a trophy. Chayton wanted a partner to share a soul. Eliza's womb wasn't a graveyard. It was a garden waiting for the right kind of rain. I want to know what you think. If you were Eliza, would you have revealed Silas's secret to the town before disappearing? Or was leaving him to rot in the canyon the perfect justice? Let me know in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that they are more than what the world expects of them. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a tale from the wild, untold history of the West. Thanks for listening.